Welcome to the First Church in Chestnut Hill, to our Sunday service for June 20th, 2021. Welcome if your journey is newly here in this space and community, and welcome if your journey has been long-lived here in community and service. I am Reverend Holly Benzenhafer, and I am today beginning my own sabbatical journey with you as Reverend Mark begins his sabbatical leave. I offer my blessings for his renewal and his restoration in his time away, and I am honored to be entrusted to accompany your community in looking forward, and I am looking forward to being in community and service with you. Blessings on our time together as well, and may the journey offer good fellowship, compassionate care, thoughtful and perhaps delightful conversation and loving community. We begin with the psalm followed by our scripture reading. So hear now from Psalm 107. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. For his steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, those he redeemed from trouble and gathered in from the lands, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south. Some went down to the sea in ships, doing business on the mighty waters. They saw the deeds of the Lord, his wondrous works in the deep. For he commanded and raised the stormy wind, which lifted up the waves of the sea. They mounted up to heaven, they went down to the depths, their courage melted away in their calamity. They reeled and staggered like drunkards and were at their wits' end. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out from their distress. He made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed. Then they were glad because they had quiet, and he brought them to their desired haven. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wonderful works to humankind. Let them extol him in the congregation of the people and praise him in the assembly of the elders.
Our reading today is from the Gospel of Mark. Prior to today's passage, Mark's account covers the time when Jesus was baptized by John in the River Jordan and his early ministry. As he gained renown as a healer, Jesus attracted more and more followers. In Galilee, he instructed his disciples to secure a boat so he could address the assembled throng on the shore without being crowded. This is the setting where our passage takes place when Jesus calms the storm. Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was, in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Our reading ends here.
As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown, good Lord, show me the way. Oh, sisters, let's go down, come on down. Oh, sisters, let's go down, down in the river to pray. As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the robe and crown, good Lord, show me the way. Oh, brothers, let's go down, come on down. Come on, brothers, let's go down, down in the river to pray. As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown, good Lord, show me the way. Oh, fathers, let's go down, come on down. Oh, fathers, let's go down, down in the river to pray. As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the robe and crown, good Lord, show me the way. Oh, mothers, let's go down, come on down, don't you wanna go down? Come on, mothers, let's go down, down in the river to pray. As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown, good Lord, show me the way. Oh, sinners, let's go down, come on down. Oh, sinners, let's go down, down in the river to pray. As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the robe and crown, good Lord, show me the way.
Today marks the summer solstice, the point in our collective traversing around the sun that indicates the longest day and the shortest night. It seems strange in these long days of waking with the sunlight and lingering into the gloaming of long sunsets that today marks the turn toward shorter and shorter days and longer nights. 6 months from now, we will come upon the winter solstice, the longest night, the shortest day, and perhaps greet its shadows with candlelight, a small flame that connects us to today's blaze of the sun. You have welcomed me as your sabbatical minister to this journey between the solstices, between the full brightness of the sun and the enduring light of the candle in winter, while Reverend Mark is away. I delighted in meeting many of you at the meet and greet a few Sundays ago, and I am grateful for your warm hospitality and generous welcome. I look forward to knowing you better in the time ahead, and as we now relish these long days of summer, emerging carefully and hopefully from COVID in travel and at home, I look forward to our sojourn together between the lights of the solstices and in community, compassion, and hope. Turning to Mark's text today, we find the depiction of another form of sojourn. We will be exploring elements of the practice of sojourn and pilgrimage together over the next several summer weeks. The story picks up with Jesus and his followers at the end of a very strenuous few days. Tired and worn from the press and the demands of the crowds, he climbs into one of several boats, just as he is, finds a soft spot in the stern, and promptly falls asleep. Jesus is not a sailor. In this moment, he turns responsibility over to those in his company who are experienced on the water. Fishermen like Peter and Andrew, James and John, and likely others unnamed and forever unknown to us, who know this body of water, the Sea of Galilee, very well. He trusts them to know what they know and how to do what they need to do to navigate the wind and the water. He trusts them in this navigation so that the crossing will enable him to engage in what he needs: restorative sleep, to allow him to fall into the deep sleep, the dreamful sleep, and below. These are stages of sleep that we do not easily or effectively enter and remain in when we do not feel safe or when we are unsure of our companions and the environment around us. In her book, Sustaining Spirit, Self-Care for Social Justice, Naomi Ortiz likens such actions to having healthy boundaries. She notes, when we have boundaries in place, we understand in the moment that what the body feels and what it needs. We can make a choice about what to do in the moment, even if we are under a lot of pressure. In the moment, Jesus models for us and his companions a deep attunement to his needs. He needs to rest. He needs to be as he is, with people who do not demand more of him than that. He needs to be able to turn off after being on with the crowds for such an extended time. He needs others to do the necessary work of this part of the journey. He needs a soft and sheltered place to land. He needs to sleep. The Gospels give scant evidence of Jesus sleeping, except on the water. In the rock of the boat, the sea salt spray and the gull's cries, Jesus knows what his body feels and needs, as Ortiz describes it. Too many of us are familiar with the weight of that need, the tangible heft of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual exhaustion. This weight insidiously grows in so many lives that as it bears down, it also normalizes, so that whole communities of people carry it as it bends and misshapens bodies and minds and spirits until a life of bounding time for rest, renewal, and restoration seems at best unrealistic and at worst totally alien and suspect. This weight and its debilitation was quickly laid bare in the early weeks of the COVID pandemic shutdown, as prior systems of overwork and expectation that had increasingly intruded on time for rest breached whatever boundaries people did have and flooded communities with extraordinary demands for emotional, psychological, and physical endurance in the face of social injustices and blatant inequalities and life-threatening pandemic. As we in the United States have the privilege to begin to make tentative steps toward what we hope is a post-pandemic life, it is not too far of a reach for many of us and our neighbors to find that we are standing on the dock, just as Jesus, exhausted and worn, and needing someone to take us in and guide the boat while we drop into a safe place and rest. In this moment, please take the rudder and let us rest. Let us grieve. Let us complain. Let us breathe. Let us figure out how to be in a new reality. Please take the rudder. Please don't require me to do it for this moment. And let me rest. Ortiz frames this space for us in her own reflection as a disabled mestiza author and visual artist who lives on the U.S.-Mexico border. She says, self-care isn't about guaranteeing happiness or control. Part of self-care is about survival, ideally making it through the day, weaving in small ways to support the body, mind, and heart, so that I can know that when there is a choice to be made or if I just need to surrender. Being gentle with myself, she says, in times of surrender reminds me that I am deserving of gentleness. There is a time for surrendering, a time for quiet stillness and waiting. This kind of waiting is not an act of passivity, but an act of courage. Courage gathered up into the self-care lesson of learning how to be gentle with myself, when no decision I can make can get me out of the situation. Choosing small ways to be gentle with myself keeps me going. These small acts make surrendering to whatever is happening a little more bearable. And when I am gentle with myself, my mind remembers that I have a body that needs to be attended. Gentleness weaves my body, mind, and spirit together so that they are not disconnected as times of crisis pass through. Holding Ortiz's words, how are we to maintain gentleness for ourselves and for our neighbors and the strangers in our midst when the wind and the waves begin to roil? Mark's text does not end with Jesus having a deep restorative rest as his companions ably navigated the Sea of Galilee to the opposite shore, where they feasted on fish after building a fire on the beach and stared up at the stars and talked into the night. No, somewhere along the journey, the winds rise and the waves beat against the boat, and its occupants find themselves standing in water. I will invite you now to enter into a theological imagining with me of this sparse text, because I find myself wondering at this point, who feels competent to the task at hand and surrenders in the moment to courage and action? And who on the boat is frightened to the point of breaching Jesus' needs to alleviate their own by surrendering in the moment to perceptions of crisis and self-preservation? In this theological imagination, notice with me the people on the boat. You have Jesus, who is asleep in the storm and in the stern. You have the experienced fishermen who are navigating the storm. And you have the other companions, Possibly, most likely, landlubbers. Perhaps Luke, the physician, or Judas, the group's treasurer, maybe Mary Magdalene or Thomas, the twin. They're riding out the storm, but doing so in an unfamiliar setting where they have little or no expertise. So perhaps the fishermen have directed them to bail the water, and it will be fine. In the moment, however, their lack of expertise and of experience with the situation leads them to interpret it as a crisis. And without the reserves of practices of self-care and gentleness, without the ability to know as a seaman would whether or not they are really in dire trouble or not, they cannot pause and hear the directions from their companions and understand them to be valid. Rather than trust their experienced friends to guide them as Jesus had, they rush to wake Jesus, breaching his need to assuage their own. Don't you care that we are perishing? For souls with scant experience on the water, a storm, or even rough seas can be a very frightening experience. Gazing into the trough of a wave or seeing the water get closer and closer to the boat's rail is unsettling, to say the least. In this bit of theological reverie, though, let's also consider that while the wind and the waves are buffeting the boat, they may have also been favorably speeding it on its way. They may have been blowing the boat directly where it needed to go, only faster and more unexpectedly. And what does Jesus do? In true Markian fashion, he wakes and seems to rather harshly invoke, "Peace, be still," in an act of miracle working that stops the wind and becalms the boat. His admonition is directly influenced in Ortiz's practices of self-care in a crisis. To pause and sink into gentleness and stillness that roots in courage rather than fear, allowing us a boundary of time, if even for a moment, to discern what is truly a crisis, an obligation, or a danger, and what is perceived to be that way. Peace, he says. Remember the core of your being. Be still. Stop. Stop chaos spinning. Stop playing what if. Stop feeding anxieties. Be. The elements, the air, the water, respond in an instant. The humans, not so much. When Jesus turns to whoever decided to wake him up, he chastises them. Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith? Faith in what? He was asleep and no sailor. They came to him for a quick fix. Instead, Jesus' question was not to them, but turned on them. If the Gospel of Mark were not well known for its brevity, then perhaps the conversation would have continued along these lines. Why are you afraid? Have you no faith? Look around you. Think about who you're with. When will you start trusting each other, listening to each other, and working together? You had everything you needed to do this work, this good work, and do it well. And you chose not to. I have brought you into good and enduring community. How will you handle the real crises if you cannot recognize the value in each other and within yourselves? Your call and conviction is to better this life. I have called you to this. Your conviction is to this. How can one storm upend all that? I can't do it all for you. I have to wait and be able to do it through you. Note that in the response to be awakened, Jesus overcorrects the storm and becalms the boat. A becalmed boat on the ocean has a characteristic glopping sound as the water grows still and bumps against the boat. And the water itself takes on a glassy aspect, and the air hangs above the expanse. And vessels simply drift. Historically, a becalmed sailing ship would get stuck and could be stuck for days or weeks on end, endlessly, aimlessly, drifting, waiting for a breeze to move it, while the crew rationed water and food in the hopes that the wind would eventually pick up. In one last bit of reverie, perhaps Jesus looks at his saltwater-soaked little group of companions and sighs. And perhaps he said something to them along the lines of, if you won't work together in the storm, then you will have to work together rowing the boat to shore in the calm. And in my imagining, he turns and goes back to the stern, plumps up his cushion, and goes back to sleep. In our life journeys, we often meet crises woefully unprepared. And some of us live in circumstances that afford us no time or resources to take the wind. And others of us feel capable and resilient until we are unmoored by waves we did not anticipate. As we begin the solstice to solstice journey, however, I entreat you to claim and not forget that we meet each day, each moment, each breath in community. Mark's text affirms that in no way are we called to be singular, alienated, or sole pilgrims on this journey. We are called into community to trust and have faith with one another, to pause and to discern our individual and collective paths in tandem, and when necessary, to get out our oars, sing the sea shanties, and bring the boat to shore, leaving no one behind. Wind and water together with us. Together in community. So for this season, between the solstices and whatever the wind and the water may bring, I welcome the opportunity to walk alongside you, to discover and cherish and delight in all that you have to offer, and to hopefully also have something to bring that offers benefit and goodness in community. Amen.
Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water, 'cause God's gonna trouble the water. See that host all dressed in white, God's gonna trouble the water. The leader looks like an Israelite, God's gonna trouble the water. See that band all dressed in red, God's gonna trouble the water. Looks like the band that Moses led, God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water, 'cause God's gonna trouble the water. Look over yonder and what do I see? God's gonna trouble the water. The Holy Ghost a-comin' on me, God's gonna trouble the water. You don't believe I've been redeemed, God's gonna trouble the water. Follow me down to a Jordan stream, God's gonna trouble the water. I said wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. I said God's gonna trouble the water. Oh, God's gonna trouble the water.
As we prepare hearts and minds and bodies to turn from this service to our lives of service in the world, we do so with the words of the 19th century Church of Scotland minister George Matheson. O love that wilt not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that in thine ocean depths its flow may richer, fuller be. The service is ended. Now go from this place to all of your other places as practitioners of gentleness and courage, healing and hope, with your communities and within yourself. Blessings on your journey. Go in peace.